Since 2021, I've been living through what has increasingly been a horrendous divorce. And no, this was not my choice. My then wife decided that she didn't want to be married anymore. And in the state of Texas, that is completely permitted.
I think the reform to no-fault divorce is far simpler. It should be reformed by simply ceasing to exist. Marriage is much more than a contract. It's a covenant. But to the extent that it is also a contract, it's hard to think of any other situation in which a contract can be broken for no reason by either party without the consent of the other and entirely without cause.
So a lot of people have been covering Steven Crowder's divorce and kind of like the fallout from all of that. And I actually decided last week I wasn't going to talk about it because I felt like a lot of people were covering it in like a very sensationalist way. And I actually didn't appreciate some of the comments I got basically saying, well, they don't care about the videos I'm making right now. They're waiting for me to dunk on Steven Crowder. And why I didn't like that is because we're not just talking about Steven Crowder doing something wrong. We're talking about Steven Crowder being a really abusive and manipulative husband to his wife. And I'm not going to actually show you the video today. We are going to talk about the video. And it just left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth that people wanted me to like dunk on Steven Crowder for someone divorcing him and him kind of like lying about the circumstances. But with that said, I wanted to make this video because one thing stood out to everyone in that Steven Crowder basically said in the video, he was mad that his wife could divorce him without having the grounds you often get in divorce of infidelity or actually being physically harmed by your partner. And this is called a no-fault divorce, which he did. And I didn't realize it's actually a very, very popular talking point with conservative pundits that they want to get rid of no-fault divorce. And that's what today's video is going to be about. And this is actually something that is kind of reaching Republican politicians as well. So not only are they doing a massive war on women's rights in general at the moment, now they want to stop people, but let's keep it real, they probably only think about women in this instance, from actually being able to divorce their husbands without having the grounds I mentioned or other grounds. Cornell Law School describes no-fault divorce as the most common type of marriage dissolution. Traditional fault divorce requires a person filing for divorce to prove some wrongdoing by their spouse that breached the marriage contract, like cruelty, adultery, desertion. In contrast, no-fault divorces do not require any showing of wrongdoing. Rather, the filing spouse simply claims as grounds for the divorce that the couple cannot get along and the marriage has factually broken down. Like I said, conservatives want to get rid of that so they can basically trap women in these marriages. And you're going to hear some of their arguments throughout the video. And they're either really naive or they're just putting on a front. They're talking about like salvaging the marriage and you just got to like work through your problems. And people were even saying that in response to the terrible video that was published with the conversation between Steven Crowder and his wife. And then we're going to get into people like Matt Walsh, who are even more sinister about this, talking about like bloodlines and weird fash stuff. So we're going to talk about all of this today. This is the intro, but I don't really want to dwell on promoting my socials and stuff. But you guys know that you can follow me on all social media. It's all down in the description. And also consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. Now let's start the video with like my own kind of experience of this stuff. So I've been lucky enough that my parents have been together and they've been married my entire life. They're still together. They have a happy marriage. Me and my siblings have had a very nice upbringing. And at no point did I wish they would divorce because they were creating a terrible environment for raising children. But on that note, that is something that I've heard a lot in my personal life in terms of like family and friends, and also just a sentiment online is that I wish my parents would get divorced because they made each other miserable and that actually had a knock-on effect of making me miserable. And this is just for parents who don't even get on. Like there is no infidelity, there is no abuse in the relationship, they just become sick of each other. And even in that instance, they're saying, I wish they divorced because although they stayed together to give me this illusion of like a stable family, it actually made my life worse and I would have rather them be happy separately. And this also would have made me happier because I would have had a better childhood. And I'm sure a lot of you guys can either relate to that sentiment or you've heard people express that sentiment. Because I've had friends throughout my life who said that. They wish their mum would leave their dad. They wish their parents get divorced because they make the whole home situation really unbearable for the children. Now, that's not what a lot of conservatives think. They think you should stay together no matter what, because they think having that family unit is actually better than the alternative, when a lot of people know it's not. But then we have the other side of it, which I've experienced in my own family, is just terrible domestic abuse. And I've had numerous people in my family who've suffered at the hands of horrible partners, people they've had children with, people they've been married to. And often the story is they start off nice and then they become more and more controlling, and then they become actually like very physically abusive. And because of the more conservative worldview, often people in their own life would tell them to stay with them. Stay with him for your children. Stay with him, you know, he's not all bad. But now, thankfully, we're in an environment now where most people in like the secular world, they will say, leave that person, that is unacceptable, call the police. But we all know back in the past it wasn't like that. And thanks to women's rights movements, thanks to more progressive change, now women have more avenues to escape these relationships, and they also do not have to rely on them for their social circle, and also as a monetary thing, because as we all know back in the past, men were the main breadwinners. Of course, even the laws meant that men got paid more for the same job. So often they would be trapped financially in these relationships. But thankfully, that is less and less the case, although that does still happen. But of course, in the more severe instances, these are grounds for divorce, but you can understand why people often don't get divorced, because they're being manipulated, or they're being abused, or they're stuck in these relationships for one reason or another. I remember when I was a journalist, I wrote about refugees stuck in terrible marriages, and they basically had no avenue out, because if they actually went to social services, more often than not, they would actually report them to immigration and they'd get deported. And like this Cornell Law School thing said, most people get divorced with no fault divorces just because the relationship has broken down. And you think that would make sense to most people. If you absolutely despise each other, that is not healthy for either one of you, and it definitely is not a healthy environment to raise children. But of course, conservatism is about upholding the patriarchy, and the patriarchy has very set in stone rules for what a woman should be. A woman should be a mother, a woman should be a wife who provides for her husband. Her husband is traditionally like the breadwinner, and she should do all the chores, all the cooking. Remember that viral video of all those Daily Wire conservatives saying they never do laundry?
It's kind of a trick question, because I hate them both equally. But I guess I would say I would rather do the dishes, but I'd prefer if she just did both of them.
Wrong answer.
Michael, to you.
Dishes, it's no question. I'm not sure in our entire marriage if I've ever done a full load of laundry, so I think I have that one.
I like it. All right, Drew?
Well, this is a trick question, because I have not done anything around the house for 40 years. I've been a completely useless, but it's clear that if I had to choose, it would have to be dishes, because she was just out of town for a month, and I actually called her up and said, how do you do laundry? So I think dishes is the only thing I know how to do.
Like, conservatives are such great catches, aren't they? And even in that video I made about the conservative dating app.
What are you looking for in a partner?
They just have to be a conservative.
Definitely someone that wants to have kids.
I like an independent man. Personally, I like the alpha male vibe.
I said even conservative women don't really want to date conservative men, because of course, men, no matter what political affiliation, can be extremely sexist, they can be abusive and everything like that. Within the conservative men, where they had the ideology of, yeah, women are less than men, women are lesser, and women do not deserve the same rights as men, and women do not deserve to enjoy the same privileges as men in society. And that is, of course, firmly what conservative talking heads like Steven Crowder believe in as well. So I don't want to dwell on this part of the video too much, and like I said, I'm not actually going to play you the footage, but basically Yashar Ali published some footage of the Crowders arguing while his wife Hillary was about 8 months pregnant. And any of you who watched the video, most of you probably watched it if you're watching this video, it's gross. And of course, although you don't see their entire relationship distilled into this short video, you can easily get the sense of what a terrible person Steven Crowder is, what a terrible husband Steven Crowder is, how he views his wife in this patriarchal way, even though she's heavily pregnant, is absolutely disgusting. So disgusting, in fact, actually, I saw a lot of conservatives condemning Crowder for how he was acting, which I find very interesting that certain conservatives were condemning him while also previously making videos about how they think no-fault divorce should be removed from the legal system. So just from Yashar's reporting, so the Crowders were married in 2012 after dating for 2 years and being engaged for less than a year. Hillary Crowder filed for divorce in December 2021 after she learned that her husband had hired a divorce attorney a month earlier. Hillary Crowder welcomed twins in August 2021. Despite her best efforts, her husband was absent when their twins were born. Nice. Instead, he met their newborn twins later that day at the hospital. The night before she gave birth, Stephen and Hillary exchanged a series of text messages about separating. Hillary sent her husband one of the final text messages. "Stephen, I'm afraid of you and your rage. You are scary. You scare me. I want to heal things, but you have to take responsibility. Stop blaming others. Stop feeling pain and sadness only for yourself." And the family put out a statement as well saying, "Hillary is currently living alone in Dallas, apart from her family and support system in Michigan, and is focused on taking care of her young children. She is not prepared at this time to speak about her divorce becoming public or the misleading statements made by Stephen about their relationship. The truth is that Hillary spent years hiding Stephen's mentally and emotionally abusive behavior from her family and friends while she attempted to save their marriage. In June of 2021, Stephen left their home to pursue elective surgery. Hillary urged him to get the help he needed to address his abuse with the hope that their marriage could be saved and they could peacefully live together as a family. Instead, Stephen refused to do so and chose not to be with his wife during the birth of their twin children. After the birth, Stephen bought a townhouse and left their home permanently. Hillary was unaware that Stephen had hired a divorce attorney and asked his assistant to cut Hillary off financially. So like I was saying before, like an unhappy marriage often does have an impact on children, even if parents don't think that. But based on what Hillary was saying, based on the footage, and based on all the stories about Stephen Crowder and how he treats people, let alone his actual YouTube career, where he's just an absolute insane bigot, racist, homophobe, sexist, he's literally all of it. You can probably get from that he's the guilty party here. But a lot of fans are saying Hillary Crowder is Amber Heard 2.0 or something. That's absolutely disgusting. Stephen Crowder, of course, responded to this, kept talking about the children, and he was also mad that she could initiate the divorce without proving infidelity or physical harm. And we're going to get into why I think he hates this so much, but let's watch some of his response.
Since 2021, I've been living through what has increasingly been a horrendous divorce. Now, let me say on the outset, to be clear, there is no infidelity, any kind of physical abuse at all on either side. And no, this was not my choice. My then wife decided that she didn't want to be married anymore. And in the state of Texas, that is completely permitted. It's been the most heartbreaking experience of my life, what I consider to be my deepest personal failure. And just so you know, my opinions on parenting and families have not changed. I've always believed that children need a mom and a dad, that divorce is horrible. And I still believe that children need a mom and a dad and that divorce is horrible. But in today's legal system, my beliefs don't matter. In Texas, divorce is permitted when one party wants it, period. So for well over a year, in the best interest as well as physical safety of my children, we've decided to keep this issue private and to resolve it privately with the appropriate attorneys, what have you, legal jargon. My children are blameless, completely without fault, and so we decided to resolve these issues privately as it's in their best interests, both emotionally and physically, to do so.
So I'm sure the way to prove to the world that you actually were a good husband and your wife is like the devil is keep complaining that in the state of Texas, she's allowed to end the marriage if she wants to. Because that's such a terrible thing for someone to have to do, isn't it? They can, if they no longer want to be with you, they can stop being with you. Just like people do all the time in loads of relationships. But apparently, because you're married, it's terrible. And the reason he hates this so much is multiple things. Firstly, it's obviously a woman getting to choose to end their relationship. He doesn't choose. He didn't end it. She ended it, despite the fact he was getting a divorce lawyer as well. So he probably got beaten to the punch there. So he's mad about that. And it's embarrassing for him. Like, he feels like his manhood has basically been stripped away because he didn't want a divorce, according to this little video. He didn't want it. He wanted to be there for the family. It's all her. It's all her. She is ruining the family because of whatever reason. It wasn't Stephen. He wanted to be this good dad, this good husband. He wanted the family to stay together. And it's Texas's fault. It's Texas. They shouldn't have no-fault divorce. She should be trapped in a relationship where he gets to talk to his 8th-month pregnant wife with twins the way he did in that video. He gets to order her around, telling her about like her wifely duties like he did in that video. I wonder why you wouldn't want the divorce, but she would want a divorce because you expected her to be your servant, basically your slave, to give you children and to not complain. And you liked it like that. Like many men in these horrible relationships, they like it like that. If you have a partner who will do everything, essentially be your maid, do all your laundry, like those Daily Wire people say they've never done laundry because their wife always does it. That's what these people want. And the fact that they can just be like, I'm sick of this, I'm leaving, they hate that because it's all about control of women. Like all of these attacks on women's rights lately by conservatives, it's about control. They want to control women. They want to put women in the patriarchal place of mother, wife, someone who looks after them without complaining, and they have no means to actually escape that relationship as long as you don't leave, I don't know, bruises on them, as long as you don't, cheat on them, then they have to stay. But I thought this was quite a fringe opinion, even in conservative circles, because it is the most popular way to get divorced. How many prominent conservatives get divorced all the time? Rupert Murdoch, Donald Trump, so many of them just having multiple wives and getting divorced based on no fault grounds. You'd think they'd all love it. I didn't realise it's actually a pretty popular thing. It often has a religious justification. I'm not sure these men actually are thinking about the religious stuff, but I will admit, in certain Christian communities, getting divorced is like the worst thing ever for some reason. And no matter what, they will pressure you to stay in these terrible relationships because, I don't know, God doesn't like divorce. You're going to have to be like Henry VIII and start a whole new religion to get divorced from your wife. So like I said, I thought it was more fringe. I've seen Ben Shapiro say no fault divorce should be a thing. I've also seen Jordan Peterson say it shouldn't be a thing because it's selfish. And that's the way these conservatives frame it. It's women being liberal feminists and they want to take agency over their own lives, so they become selfish and ruin a family. They ruin a marriage because they want to seek like earthly pleasures, I think one of them said. And often they talk about how when women are more financially independent, they leave terrible marriages. Like that's a bad thing because unlike the past, they're no longer trapped in these relationships. Otherwise they could be like homeless or have no money. So first of all, let's go to Michael Knowles. He talks about Tom Brady getting divorced. Now, I don't think he specifically mentions no fault divorce, which Matt Walsh will, but let's listen to how he frames them two getting divorced.
But I think it is our responsibility as citizens, not friends of Tom Brady. I don't know Tom Brady, not as, people who are in the family, but our responsibility as citizens to say they shouldn't do this. They shouldn't do this. I know it's a fallen world and people have tough marriages and people go through rough patches. I have never seen a family improved by divorce. Sometimes, in very rare cases, there is not only a right but an obligation to have some kind of separation. Let's say that, I don't know, the husband is a knockdown, violent, abusive drunk and he's thrown his wife against the walls. And sometimes, for just the protection of one's own life and the life of one's own kids, there is some separation that might be required. Say until the husband goes to rehab or something like that, figures out his life. I'm not denying that. But as a rule, I have never, ever seen a family improved by divorce. Figure it out. But it's not reparable at this point. It's absolutely, the marriage is just beyond repair. No, it isn't. How do you avoid divorce? How do you keep a marriage together? And the best advice I heard was very simple. They said, the best way to keep your marriage together and have a long marriage is just don't get divorced. Just work through it. But there is something greater than your individual desires. Certainly the kids' interests should come before the interests of the parents. But the marriage itself is an institution. And I don't care if you don't feel happy at this particular moment. You're not going to feel happy at every single moment of your life. There are more important things than your individual pleasure at any given moment. Just work it out.
So that is an absolutely amazing take, how he downplays like serious issues of abuse, and he's talking about like a husband doing it as well. So we're talking about like a more conventional understanding of a marriage gone wrong because there are higher rates of husbands obviously abusing their wives and stuff. In this made up scenario he just referenced, which of course is true for so many women, he's talking about a husband like abusing his wife physically and then just saying they shouldn't get divorced, they should be separated, he should go to rehab and they should work it out. So there's actually like no boundaries. There is literally no line you can cross in a marriage, according to Michael Knowles, where a divorce would be justified. He just thinks, stay together and work it out. But if you have a husband like Steven Crowder, you're meant to work it out with him. How do you work it out? How do you stop him acting like that? You can't. And he's talking about people get divorced being selfish, and he's saying the same thing about the children, like I said. And I'm sure there's people in the comments, if you feel comfortable sharing, if you wish your parents got divorced or your parents did get divorced and you had a happier life because of it. Because this is what happens. Children know. Children can feel it. Children get affected by parents hating each other and only staying together for children, even if there isn't any of this terrible stuff going on, which Michael Knowles also acknowledges could be going on, but they still shouldn't get divorced. So what's the answer? Just everyone get married, stay in terribly unhappy marriages at the least, or maybe stay in very violent marriages at the most, where you could actually end up dead from your partner. That is an extremely common way that people get killed across the world, even historically, right? This is the type of thing he's advocating for. He's saying, I bet there's no people's lives who've been improved by divorce. There are so many people's lives improved by divorce, and I bet Hillary Crowder's life will be massively improved by divorcing this guy. I bet the overwhelming majority of people who initiate divorce do not regret it in the slightest, because you're doing it for a reason, and it's probably a very serious reason, because you are breaking this marriage. There's probably a reason you got married in the first place, decided to make it legal and all that. So I'm going to probably believe that there's a very serious reason why you want to do that. And also, don't these guys love freedom? Do you not agree with the freedom to end a relationship you're no longer happy in? No, they don't actually. Because of their religion or something, they think you should just stay unhappy in a marriage forever for some weird benefit of your children that probably doesn't even exist. So Michael Knowles is like the kind of Christian weirdo of the Daily Wire. So now let's go on to literally just an unapologetic fascist, Matt Walsh, talk about why he wants no-fault divorce completely removed as a right.
To truly go your own way, alone and isolated, is to give up on your duty, your legacy, your ancestors, your bloodline, your civilization, your happiness. The movie Into the Wild tells the story of a man, Christopher McCandless, who went his own way to the extreme, burned his Social Security card, left his family, hiked into the Alaskan wilderness, and he died there alone. And as he was dying, he wrote in the margins of a book the words, "Happiness is only real when shared." This is one of the most essential truths of human nature. Most of us are meant to share our happiness with others. And for most of us, that's going to be with a spouse and children. Most divorces are initiated by women, and also most women have careers. There's no reason why a woman with a job who decides to leave her husband and break the marriage vows should then be rewarded with a monthly stipend from the man that she wants nothing to do with. But I think the reform to no-fault divorce is far simpler. It should be reformed by simply ceasing to exist. Marriage is much more than a contract. It's a covenant. But to the extent that it is also a contract, it's hard to think of any other situation in which a contract can be broken for no reason by either party without the consent of the other and entirely without cause. When you make divorce easy, and for at least one party concerned profitable, you get more of it. In fact, shockingly, when you make divorce easier and more profitable for one sex at the expense of the other, you get a greater number of the members of that sex initiating divorces. If you incentivize disloyal, selfish behavior, you get more of it. However, if you make divorce difficult and potentially costly for everybody involved, not for one spouse, but both, then you've given couples an incentive to find another solution for their supposedly irreconcilable differences. And you've sent a message on a cultural level that the marital vow is meaningful and important and not something that can be just discarded on a whim. Now, no-fault divorce advocates will argue that the alternative, divorce without the no-fault option, can tend to be traumatic and it could get really ugly. But there's no way around that, and we shouldn't look for one. Like, divorce is an ugly thing no matter what. Besides, no-fault divorce doesn't mitigate the trauma or ugliness of divorce. Instead, too often, it simply shifts the trauma so that one party is made to carry most of its burden.
So although people like this like to frame it as like both the man and the woman in their like heteronormative version of marriage, which is the only marriage these people believe in, he's basically saying, like the others, it's selfish to get a no-fault divorce, but he's arguing that it should be banned. He's saying, well, most divorces are like traumatic and horrible, but wouldn't it be more traumatic for children, like Hillary Crowder's children, if they grew up in an environment with Steven Crowder, if they grew up in an environment with both of them and him treating her like we've seen in the videos, isn't that terrible for a child? Shouldn't the person who's suffering be able to pull themselves and their children out of that toxic environment and away from that controlling parent who we've seen on camera has very conservative patriarchal views of what a woman should do even when heavily pregnant. Matt Walsh is saying no, people like Hillary Crowder or people who have it even worse shouldn't be allowed to escape. They just have to work it out, like Michael Knowles says. No matter what happens, no matter if they're getting terribly physically abused, they just should stay forever. And like I said, they're trying to frame it as like both sides, but because these people have also expressed in the past that it's, you know, feminism ruining marriage because women now get divorced at higher rates, especially if they're more financially stable and stuff, they're clearly mad about that. They're clearly mad about women having agency to step outside the patriarchy, because you guys might be listening to some of these arguments and thinking about like your own worldview or your own views of marriage. That's not what's really relevant here. It's about the conservative view of marriage and the conservative view of patriarchy. Marriage for them isn't two people, two equals, deciding to get into like this legal relationship based on love and valuing each other. It's about, like he says at the start, creepily, about bloodlines and ancestry. And if you know anything about Matt Walsh, who talked about preserving the Anglo-Saxon race, this gets even more creepy, but he sees it as something completely different. They all see it as something completely different. It's not based on love. It's based on starting a family, and starting a family where your wife has a very, very specific gender role. Remember, these guys all talking about how they can't do their own laundry, right? That's because they don't see that as their responsibility, and it might seem more frivolous and stuff, but in marriages, historically, women are seen to be doing the housework, the chores, and men don't help out ever. And that's what they want. These conservative men, they still want a submissive servant. So the fact that a woman can leave them at any time, even if they're married with kids, that makes them uneasy. Because I think deep down, these guys would even admit to themselves, they don't see women as equals. They don't want women to be equal. They don't want women to have equal rights at all to men. And that's how they're viewing the no-fault divorce. Because in the conservative worldview, why would they divorce their partners? Like, why would Matt Walsh divorce his partner if he basically has like a live-in servant who will give him children, give him heirs for his bloodline? Why would he do that? He wouldn't want to do that. If you have a wife who basically serves as your servant, you probably wouldn't really want a divorce. And then she has no ability to escape that marriage in the world these people envision. And then conservatives wonder, when there's conservative dating apps, why there are no women there. Because fundamentally, even though there are loads of conservative women, even though there are even conservative women who do subscribe to the same ideology as this, they believe they should be just wives and mothers, there are also a lot of conservative women who might not be as religious. And if you go on a date with a guy who believes this, why would you want to further the relationship? Why would you just want to be treated like absolute garbage by them? And like I said, men treating women or men treating their partners regardless of gender badly is not exclusive to right-wingers at all. I'm not going to even pretend that's a thing, because like I've said in other videos, I've seen leftists, even prominent leftists, treat their partners like garbage too. But like I said, the problem being here is that it's more likely that a conservative man is going to treat you badly because of the whole way they view society and view marriage. They don't view it as a loving relationship based on two equals. They believe you're getting married to have this role in their lives as their servant, the child's primary caregiver, and also someone who's not going to have much independence outside the family, because that's reserved for the man. It's like this very Mad Men 1960s view of what a home and a marriage should be like. But it's pretty clear these religious conservatives still see it as a way to uphold patriarchy, because they're unapologetic about this. They say patriarchy is good. Jordan Peterson's whole thing is patriarchy is the best way to organize society. Why they don't want no-fault divorce, because in their heads, when they're thinking about marriage, they're thinking about women leaving this relationship. They're not really thinking about themselves there, because in their view of marriage, they've got it pretty good. They have this servant, they have this woman who will do everything for them in this conservative patriarchal view, so they don't want someone to be able to break out of that without them also wanting it. And just one more little thing before we end the video. Like I said, this is entering the realm of politics. So Rolling Stone did an article called "The Next Front in the GOP's War on Women, No-Fault Divorce." It just talks about like Steven Crowder and stuff. So Republicans across the country are now reconsidering no-fault divorce. There isn't a huge mystery behind the campaign. Like the Crusades against contraception, making it more difficult to leave an unhappy marriage is about control. Crowder's home state could be the first to eliminate it if the Texas Republican Party gets its way. Last year, they added language to its platform calling for an end to no-fault divorce. We urge the legislature to rescind unilateral no-fault divorce laws, to support covenant marriage, and to pass legislation extending the period of time in which divorce may occur to 6 months after the date of filing for divorce. The Texas GOP retains an iron grip on both chambers of the state legislature and hold every single elected office statewide. Should they decide to prioritize this, they would likely have the votes they need to turn the platform into law. It's not just Texas. A similar proposal is being workshopped by the Republican Party of Louisiana. The Nebraska GOP has affirmed its belief that no-fault divorce should only be accessible to couples without children. At the RNC in 2016, delegates considered adding language declaring, "Children are made to be loved by both natural parents united in marriage. Legal structures such as no-fault divorce, which divides families and empowers the state, should be replaced by a fault-based divorce." But at the moment, it doesn't seem to be a high priority on the GOP's list of things to do. But if just one of them starts making noise about it, it gets coverage, it becomes part of the agenda. Well, they have the whole media apparatus on side of them. Crowder, Shapiro, Peterson, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, they'll all go out and say, yeah, we should support this. Support ending no-fault divorce. And then in Texas, if that starts doing it, then other places will start doing it. It'll be like dominoes falling because they fundamentally agree with it. Just at the moment, it seems like they have other priorities like making the lives of LGBT people hell and stuff like that. So don't be surprised if we actually hear this becoming even more popular, despite the fact it's insanely hypocritical because Donald Trump, Rupert Murdoch, all these conservatives, plenty of wives, plenty of divorces, and plenty of no-fault divorces, it seems, as well, among conservative celebrities or conservative politicians as well. So we'll see how this goes, but yeah, it's all about control. It's all about men having complete control and not allowing women to leave these relationships because, like I said, even though it would affect men and women, in the American conservative mind, the patriarchal role of women is one that massively benefits them, and they want to keep it that way. So anyway, that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.